Continuing with the theme of surrender to Krishna, and specifically the 6 angas or limbs or factors that are involved in surrendering to Krishna. And just discussing one of those 6 this evening. Dainya is the term that Bhaktivinoda Thakur uses for humility. There's other terms that we heard in the course of our time together so far. Karpanya, humility. Kind of doing this backwards in one sense. I had asked Sri Rupa to sing one of the songs from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's series of songs on humility. We'll do that at the end. So, the approach that I'd like to take is a little different than exactly just hearing his song and then amplifying the message within his song. Little bit different. The position of humility is a very natural place to begin surrendering. The process of surrender begins with humility, because if one is not humble, who wants to surrender? And the opposite we'll hear in just a little bit. We heard this morning about the absence of that humility means that false ego is strong, dominating, and when that false ego is strong, then one has a sense of being independent, and with that sense of independence, the sense of doership, and with the sense of doership, the sense of creating results, and the sense of pride in creating results. There's a whole network of misery and illusion. So that's kind of, the opposite, the own internal opposition that we're facing, not something out there that other people are making it hard for us. It's our own internal. And the internal part, so where I want to begin this evening's presentation is with internal humility, there must be some willingness to be introspective and a willingness to be self-honest as we introspect and hear from Scripture with the intent of getting beyond our false ego and getting to the point where we can improve ourselves. That's what this message is at the beginning. So we're going to read chant together a verse and read a little bit from Bhagavatam Canto 3, Chapter 29. And we can say the verse responsively, please. Adhyatmikanu Shravanam Nama Sankirtanachchame Ajavenarya Sangena Nirahang Kriyaya Tata Adhyatmikanu Shravanam Nama Sankirtanachchame Arjavenarya Sangena Nirahang Kriyaya Tata. Let's do the word for word as found in the Bhagavatam. Adhyatmika, spiritual matters. Anushravanat, from hearing. Nama Sankirtanat, from chanting the holy name. Cha, and. me, my, Arjavena, with straightforward behavior, Arya Sangena, with association of saintly persons, Nirahankriyaya, without false ego, Tata, thus. So, if you recall from this morning, this Atma Nikshepa, and is humility, is becoming freed from false ego, and with false ego, the little sequence that we described. Sense of doership, sense of pride in what we have done, and the sense of independence, although we're totally dependent. So, Nirahankriya. Here's then two other words, Arjavena. Arjavena it's a Brahminical message, straightforward behavior. Straightforward behavior. Bhaktisiddhanta, in its wonderful Brahmanism and Vaishnavism essay, it was a paper that he delivered over 2 days to a highly elite, highly educated audience. Some were on this side and some were on that side, and they were disputing with one another up to the point of, it was getting life-threatening. They were into disputing so much. So he was invited as a speaker to resolve the dispute, and when he was speaking about the Brahmanas, a whole day, it's half of his book, he made this point that the outstanding quality of a Brahmana is this one, straightforward. Saralata is the word that he used. Arjavena is the word here. Straightforward. And he used as the example in his presentation a classic one that's from the Shruti portion of the Vedas, that a young man went to Gautama Rishi and requested Gautama Rishi to accept him as a disciple. So in that period of Vedic times, the guru needed to know what is the family in which the child is born. So he asked, what's your gotra? What's the family in which you're born? The young boy said, I don't know. And so Gautama said, go ask your mother, then come back and tell me. So he went to ask his mother. Gautama said, he'll accept me as a disciple, but he wants to know what is our gotra, what's the family in which I was born. And his mother said, well, in the course of my life, I've been with so many men, I don't even know who your father is. So I can't say what your gotra is. But my name is Jabala, and you just tell him you're Satyakama Jabala. Just tell him that. So he went back and told Gautama everything that his mother had said. And Gautama said, very well, I accept you as a disciple. Because no one can say what you said without being truthful. You're saralata, you're straightforward in your dealings. And so that's the quality of a Brahmana, not by birth, but by quality. So now your first service is you go and gather some wood for the yajna, and my first instruction to you is never depart from the truth. So straightforward means, even if it's uncomfortable or inconvenient or something maybe embarrassing, you're just straightforward in your dealings with others. This is a mode of goodness character. So this is a characteristic of a devotee also. Arjavena, and then Arya Sangena. We know what the word Sangha is, really popular in U.S. these days, Sadhu Sangha retreat. So Sangha means association. And Sadhu Sangha means association with sadhus or saintly persons. This is Arya Sangena. Arya is a word that's used in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita by Krishna when he speaks to Arjuna and asks Arjuna, Anarya Jushtam Ashvargyam. How is this non-Aryan behavior overcome you, Arjuna? You know the higher purpose of life. To those that know the higher purpose of life and live according to the higher purpose of life, self-realization or God-realization, or live by spiritual values of life, like Dravida was describing, the whole issue of Bhagavad Gita was Dharma and pursuit of Dharma. That's how it began, and that's how it in the middle, and that's how it ended. Dharma. What's the standard of Dharma? And it ended with Paradharma, transcendental. So Arya Sangena is association with Aryans. So that the translation, the BBT translation reads, a devotee, this is Prabhupada's translation, a devotee should always try to hear about spiritual matters. It's an interesting combination of words, spiritual matters, adhyatmika, and should always utilize his time in chanting the holy name of the Lord. His behavior should always be straightforward and simple, and although he is not envious but friendly to everyone, he should avoid company of persons who are not spiritually advanced. So the Prabhupada taught this one. With every injunction, there's a prohibition. Do this indicates don't not do this or don't do that, and vice versa. So associate, Arya Sangena implies don't associate with the non-Aryan folks. And when you associate with the Aryan folks, there's a purpose. The purpose is spiritual elevation. The Arya mission of life, the higher purpose of life. Associate that way. So there's a very wonderful, slightly different rendering that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives. Again, compliments to Bhanu Swami for translating his commentary. So here's how his commentary reads. Listen carefully, it's slightly different. The mind, our dear friend, that thing that we so much identify with and think it's us, but it's not. The mind should become purified by continually hearing about the good and bad qualities of the antakarana. The word antakarana is not in the verse, but it's in his translation. Antakarana. Antakarana means the internal sense, or I'll read the purport, then we'll go back and read the verse. The mind should become purified by continually hearing about the good and bad qualities of the antakarana, which he indicates as the internal sense, or the subtle body, refined and concentrated intelligence plus the mind. So that thing that's not us that often we think is us is, the subtle body, what we think, what we feel, what we will. That thing that does all that is not us. That's the mind, hopefully guided by good intelligence, but at least intelligence discriminating between things is part of what we identify with. To perform bhakti using the antakarya, and we do, just like when we chant. If we're chanting properly, the antakarya is going to the holy name. But the antakarya, the mind, will wander if the soul doesn't want to get to Krishna. If the soul is averse to Krishna, we have an attitude problem in our relationship with Krishna, the mind's going to wander. So if your mind wanders, that tells you something about the soul. We got an aversion toward Krishna problem. And that's a problem. That's the root of our problem. So it's necessary to advance in spiritual life that we connect, we're attentive. We connect, we're mindful. This whole Buddhist thing of mindfulness, being in the moment. It's a whole thing about how Buddhism views that. Vaishnavas view the same thing, but there's a higher purpose, an Aryan purpose, and that's to help the soul connect with Krishna once again. But the soul has to want to connect with Krishna once again, to connect with Krishna once again, to bring the mind to the point of being attentive. And to get the mind to the point of being attentive, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying, the hearing that we do should not be, hearing the qualities and faults of other people. There's some wrong ways to hear and chant, and there's some right ways. Here's some wrong ways. Just one of the wrong ways is gathering information. We got this nice information basket, and we gather something and just become proud of how full our information basket is over here. And then from time to time, we pull some information out of our information basket and go, now wasn't that good? And people go, oh, you spoke so nicely because your information basket is so full. You're a very learned devotee. Yes, yes. That's one of the ways not to hear and chant. Then another way to not hear and chant, specifically to this context, is when one hears the faults of the mind or some nature, then one thinks, oh, that's that person who I don't like, or I think they're not so good, or I'm in this judgmental position, and think this perfectly describes this other person. It perfectly fits, their problem. That's another way to not hear and chant. And the way to hear and chant is to be reflective in this humble mood. These are instructions meant for me. Instructions meant for me are to improve myself so I can go beyond my own shortcomings and limitations and distractions and affinity for matter. It's to elevate me, this antakarana feature, the mind, because the mind is the repository of desires. Right? Just like the example in Bhagavad Gita is the mind, just as the wind carries different aromas or fragrances, so the mind carries different conceptions of life and desires and longings. Desire and hate. That thing that's part of the world of duality that then impels us towards something and away from something else, it's the mind. It's not us. It's a false sense of self and false sense of reality. I never get reality. I never get my true sense of self. And I'm always making decisions based upon the mind, being attracted or repulsed from something. Then the mind is very complex, extremely subtle, very elusive, chanchala, very flickering, and one moment it's this, the next moment it's that, and then it's who knows where it's going to be the next moment. Chanchala himana Krishna, balavat. It's a very strong, powerful thing. And you must, for yoga practice, for spiritual practice, one must control the mind. So one of the ways to help control the mind, constant chanting is mentioned, and also this antarkarana, hearing of what are the good qualities and the faults, bad qualities, and using, to perform bhakti using the antarkarana, one must hear about its good and bad qualities, understanding one has bad qualities like pride, just connecting back again with the discussion this morning about pride. You'll see there's synergy in all of these messages. Pride is a result of a false sense of doership, or ahankar. I am the doer, I create results, I've created these fantastic results, or something results, and now I'm proud of the results. It's based upon false ego. That's this nirahankriya. So you can't be free from pride as long as you're covered by false ego. And we discussed this morning, false ego is there even before we get a body. Even before we do anything, we're covered by false ego. It's really tough to get rid of false ego. The hearing and chanting process is meant for that purpose, and specifically, he says, these bad qualities, like pride, can be conquered by worship of great devotees. That's this Arya Sangena. The devotees should engage in such a practice. So by association with elevated souls, which is exactly what Kapila Dev is teaching in this section. This is Kapila Dev speaking to Devahuti. Because Devahuti, just going back several chapters, Devahuti's asked a very fundamental question, which is relevant for our lives too. How to become free from bodily attachment, false ego. How to become free from this affinity for matter. How to become free from attachment, undue attachment to the extensions of the body, family. The situation is her wonderful husband, Kardamoni, has, now that Kapila Dev, the son, their son, is of age to look after his mother, Kardamoni has gone back to the forest to engage in dhyan yoga, the process of achieving perfection for the age, although he's already perfected. He's showing by example. So she wants to know, now that my good husband is gone, and you're of age to look after me, but you're not going to stay in home forever, so my mind is very distressed. I'm very attached. Although I know the philosophy, you're not supposed to be attached. I'm attached. So what am I supposed to do? How can I relieve myself from this illusory potency that's your potency? She knows. You're the personality of Godhead. Imagine sitting in front of the personality of Godhead like this, who just happened to be your son. And it's your potency. You covered me by this potency, so you can certainly remove it. Can you remove it? Please give me instructions. So these are part of those instructions. Engage in devotional service, specifically through close association with saintly persons, and in that association with saintly persons, hear from them and serve them, exactly as said in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistuki. Bhakti awakens by this Bhagavata Seva. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and serving the person Bhagavat, the person who speaks the message of Bhagavat. There's this, little summary, why I chose this particular verse. is it's directly related to the initial and then in course of time continued humility that's necessary to practice, to begin the practice of bhakti and to further progress on the path of bhakti. Not, once upon a time I surrendered, or once upon a time I was humble, and I surrendered and I started chanting, and now I'm a devotee. There's a theme emerging that it's an ongoing process, and the ongoing process of hearing, the looking within ourselves with self-introspection and self-honesty and eagerness to improve, eagerness to discover what are the shortcomings and on the strength of good instructions overcome those shortcomings, because within the instructions there's capacity to overcome our shortcomings, which on our own we're not going to be able to do, overcome our own shortcomings. We can try, hopefully we're trying, but then descending mercy is also quite essential, and applying those instructions is part of how we get descending mercy in our lives. Hear properly with this eagerness to understand the qualities and faults of this subtle body that we're carrying around with us. This discussion between Kapila Dev and Devahuti is spoken by Maitreya to Vidura, just part of the Bhagavatam. That's how the third canto begins. And there's similar instruction in Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, there's different ways to characterize what Bhagavad Gita is, but it's a treatise on transcendental knowledge. In this Tattva Sandarbha seminar that I gave, it says that in the Mahabharata, there are 3 sections that are particularly just transcendental. There's so many things in Mahabharata that are dealing with not just transcendental subject matters, right and wrong, and struggle against good and evil, and what is to be done, what is not to be done, and so many intrigues and so forth. But to teach us principles of ethics and morality, which people should live their lives by, through the course of the history of the Kauravas and the Pandavas. But within that vast Mahabharata, there's a section that's fully transcendental. There's 3. According to Jiva Goswami Sandarbhas. One of them is Bhagavad Gita. Another is the Narayaniya section of Mahabharata, where the glories of Narayana are being related. In fact, one sage sees Narayana in the midst of a yajna, and he just goes on and on and on about the glories of Narayana. And then Vishnu Sahasranam, that section. So within the Bhagavad Gita, this treatise on transcendental knowledge, there's something that is taught by Krishna to Arjuna about how does transcendental knowledge begin, which is needed for entering into transcendence. And that is from the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the items of knowledge that are listed by Krishna. Chapter 13 starts with text 8, amanitvam adambitvam, which means humility and pridelessness. Same point, that you can't go forward in transcendence without humility and pridelessness. So humility is a sense of who you are, and pridelessness is a sense of what you think are your possessions. What is generated by you is our possessions. So, pride in our possessions. They're I and mine are connected. Then I hope this sound works. There's another, Lord Chaitanya gives another very nice instruction about the role of humility in our process of spiritual elevation. You all know what that one is, right? Sikshastakam 3. Let's hear Prabhupada. Hopefully this is going to work. Microphone? He sings it again. It was higher. Anybody that's been involved in Krishna consciousness for a little while knows this wonderful verse. It's part of the 8 verses, the only 8 slokas that Lord Chaitanya personally, we know that Lord Chaitanya personally wrote. The others were written by those who Lord Chaitanya instructed them to write what he taught and empowered them to realize everything that he taught. That must have been pretty wonderful. And they left literature. But the Shikshastakam specifically is about the process of chanting. And since the process of chanting is mentioned in this previous verse, Nama Sankirtanach Chame, it's how we should engage in that, and we should engage in that beginning with humility. Trin means straw, and one should feel oneself more humble than a piece of straw lying on the ground. Lord Chaitanya said this verse is so important that raising my hands I declare, Lord Chaitanya said, everyone, please hear me. String this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it on your neck for continuous remembrance. Like a necklace or an ornament. Just wear it always. One of my godbrothers, did you get a chance to associate with Kurmarupa at all, Subal? Kurmarupa left his body along with the cows in Vrindavan. But he had this verse tattooed on his neck. He took it literally, not just wearing on a string of the holy name, but he wasn't one of these, with tattoos all over his body. Just this humility, this important verse of Lord Chaitanya. Does anybody recognize who that is? Krishna Balaram. Well, which Krishna Balaram deities? Huh? They're in Vrindavan, but not just in our Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan. Ter Kadamba. You've seen the picture before. So, what's Ter Kadamba? Ter Kadamba, for those of you who haven't been to Vrindavan yet, please, triple please, visit Ter Kadamba. It's next to Govardhan Hill. It's my favorite place in all of Vrindavan. It's a place where Rupa Goswami would stay. Of course, he stayed in different places, but one of his favorite places to stay was a place it's kind of close to Nanda Maharaja's palace in Nandagram, where Krishna lived as a small boy, and there's also the place where Radharani lived, and so he could rendezvous with Radharani, but also where Krishna would climb up at the end of the day when the cows were coming back for the cowshed, Goshal, in, near Nanda Maharaj's palace. Krishna would climb up one of the kadamba trees, and with his flute not only made flute sound, but he could call the names of the groups of the gopis with the sound of his flute. And they were just waiting to have their name called. Their ears were, and they would come galloping to hear the sound of Krishna calling them one by one, group by, because there's a lot of cows, 900,000 cows, a lot of cows. So Krishna did a lot of calling of the different groups of the cows. And other things. He would call the gopis to come meet with him by calling their names, by playing upon his flute. Krishna had a very extraordinary flute. And there is where Rupa Goswami would sit, at this grove of kadamba trees called Ter Kadamba, and he would write transcendental literature. And it's described, these kadamba trees, when Rupa Goswami was writing something that was in the mood of separation from Krishna, the gopis feeling separation from Krishna, the leaves of the kadamba tree would fall to the ground. It was like, fall season. They just fell to the ground like tears, the kadamba tree crying. And when there was passages, because Rupa Goswami's feelings were so intense, when there was this feeling of Krishna and the gopis were meeting, all of a sudden the kadamba trees would have not only leaves again, but flowers and fragrances floating in the air, just so much moved by Rupa Goswami's transcendental bhavas of meeting and separation between the gopis and Krishna. So in that place, Ter Kadamba, there's presiding deities of Krishna Balaram. And just above, if you look carefully, just above the altar of Krishna Balaram, there's the following verse that's written by Raghunath Das Goswami, and I put in bold letters this Trinam, Adadanas Trinam Dan tire, with straw in my dantas, my teeth. Idam yache puna shimad rupa padam bhoja rajo hum syam bhave. This is Raghunath writing about his beloved Rupa. Taking a blade of grass between my teeth, I repeatedly beg that birth after birth I may obtain the dust from Srila Rupa Goswami's lotus feet. That's the humility of Raghunath Das Goswami. It's the humility of a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava means one who's very humble, and how humble is humble? You can't get much more humble than Raghunath Das Goswami. He's our Prayojana Guru. He's teaching the highest stages of spiritual elevation, and he just wants to be receiving a particle of dust from the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami, with straw in his teeth, begging again and again, birth after birth. So this, specifically the humility portion, Srila Prabhupada explains from this Shikshastakam verse, Trinadapi Sunichena. The painting here is depicting a scene from Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya was taking darshan of Lord Jagannath by this Garuda Stamba. We have a Garuda Stamba in the Brooklyn Temple. It's like a very tall column, and on top is Garuda. And one elderly lady was so eager to have darshan of Lord Jagannath, she just climbed up on Lord Chaitanya's shoulders and stood on his shoulders to have darshan of Lord Jagannath. And Lord Chaitanya's servant is freaking out. Get off of his shoulders. He's a sannyasi. What are you doing? Get away. And Lord Chaitanya is saying, no, no, no. She has such enthusiasm to have darshan of Lord Jagannath. If only I could have that qualification, to see the Lord. When she realized what she had done, she got down very quickly and was very embarrassed and ran away. But the eagerness to see the Lord is a great qualification which Lord Chaitanya recognized, and the humility that Lord Chaitanya had to appreciate the eagerness that she had to have darshan of Lord Jagannath, the Lord of her life. Because of his humility, it wasn't a problem. It was an honor to give his shoulders as a stepping place for her feet. And another illustration here is, this is Sanatana Goswami, who previous to this image here, he was Prime Minister of a third of India today. He was a big shot. He was a VIP. It's a very, very significant, powerful person who renounced it all, Chakvaturna Mashesham Mandala Pratikshani, to take the position of a mendicant, living in Vrindavan with nothing, because the spiritual value was something that he wanted so much. And when he approached Lord Chaitanya for instruction, literally, he clasped his feet. Within his teeth, he held a straw, as you see in the painting. And you're going to hear some more about this in a moment. So this is the humility of Sanatana Goswami. And one who has, according to the instructions of this verse, one can constantly chant the holy name of the Lord if one has this quality, this and the other three qualities mentioned, quality of humility. This is a photograph taken from Govardhan Hill, where it's not at all uncommon to see sadhus or different people, even worldly people, performing their dandavats, parikrama, all around Govardhan Hill, and this fellow has 108 stones, and by extending himself and as far as his hands can reach and place the stone, and 108 times, then you stand where the stones were, and then you go the next body length, and that way go around Govardhan Hill. So it's bringing one's position of humility to an extreme. But one who has this strong sense of humility, then such a person can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So we're chanting the holy name, but in order to enter into the mood of chanting the holy name best, then the mood of chanting is very important. Now, something that we discussed this morning, and I said we would elaborate on it a little bit more, is a passage from Padma Purana, which I'm just now going to read, but it mentions this word namaha. Remember this because it comes up in some other presentations. Namaha. It's a common statement, a phrase found within prayers to the Lord or his devotees, particularly to the Lord. Here's what Padma Purana says. In this word namaha, ma represents ahankar, false ego, and na represents negation of ahankar, false ego. Thus, by uttering namaha, one negates one's independent attitude. The jiva is dependent on the Lord. He lives with dependence. Therefore, one should completely reject the idea of accomplishing by one's own capacity, like doership. Nothing is left to be accomplished by the ability of the Lord. Consigning one's body to the Lord, one should serve him. The body, mind, and word, in the service of the Lord. Something that would take a little while to tell the whole story, so I won't. But what's coming to mind is a little girl, short version of this long story, 4 or 5 years old, when asked, a group of children sitting in front at a home program, why is it that we can't just, if we realize we're not finding contentment and the happiness that we thought we would get from material activities, just do a U-turn and go back to Krishna? Some of you have heard that description. And, the kids were all giggling and making noise, so I called on one of them. They had raised their hand and they were blank. But finally, after that little behavior, one little girl sitting, right there in front said, well, we want to go to Krishna, but the senses want enjoyment. And then a boy, a little further over there, said, yeah, we want to go to Krishna, but we're attached to being independent. Okay, you guys should the ones who should be giving the class. Little kids. I don't know whose Bhagavad Gita class they heard to understand all this, but that was their understanding. Sense enjoyment, and this sense of independence is very strong. Prabhupada pointed out specifically to us Americans, we have such a strong sense of independence, the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. And they're endowed with their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, that's our American spirit. We're independent. So to let go of that independence, that namaha is letting go of that independence. And where do you place that energy instead of independence? You place it in its proper position. Dependent. Dependent doesn't mean you're, like a goo-goo gaga baby, you can't do anything. It just means the spirit of your fullness of capacity is dependent upon the Supreme Lord to bless it. The results are up to Krishna while we make our endeavors towards whatever it is that we're endeavoring for. We have a role to play. So this is a very nice teaching from Padma Purana. So this is, again, on this principle of dainya, or humility. Dainya, again, is a term that Bhaktivinoda Thakur uses. There's a nice photo of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Dainya isn't discouraging. It's an impetus, like a springboard for going further, appealing for descending mercy along with whatever effort we make. And in that appeal for mercy, our submission of surrender. So here's another one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Dainya songs. Here's one of the lines and its translation. Specifically this guna nahi hovi, where he says, you look inside, you don't find any good qualities. That's dainya. And he's then asking that he not be judged. Kripakoro chodito vichar. Have mercy and not judge me. Krishna or others. And then the final line, it's an impetus for submission. Please cause me to drink the honey of your lotus feet and thereby deliver this bhakti vinod. Humility is an impetus for appeal for Krishna's mercy. And then submit, again, like, I really liked what Dravida said Friday evening about submission can mean, in one sense, you take shelter of. Another is, I submit a report. Krishna, I'm a mess. Here's the mess report. And that's my submission. Now I'm making an appeal. The appeal is, you please lift me up. You please cause me to drink the honey of your lotus feet and thereby deliver this bhakti. So remember the starting point of this discussion. These are instructions meant for us. Quite possibly Bhaktivinoda Thakur feels this kind of humility himself, but it's instructions meant for us. So we can go beyond our limitation, our stuck position, into the house of bhakti further by this impetus of surrender through the feelings of humility. See a very beautiful painting of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. There's the Madan Mohan temple in the background. I don't know what that is. And I want to read just a little bit from Chaitanya Charitamrita when they had interaction with Lord Chaitanya. This is Lord Chaitanya's trip he had planned, desired, to leave Puri to go visit Vrindavan. But he made a little detour and he went straight to Ramakeli, where Rupa and Sanatan were residing. And then there was some exchange with the Nawab, Hussein Shah, asking who was Lord Chaitanya. They made some, he's a saint, he's only going to be here for a while, don't bother with him, he's a nice guy, kind of message. The king said, I think he's the personality of Godhead. So then at night, incognito, because they're government officers, they went dressed in very simple clothing. In the dead of night, the two brothers, Rupa and Sanatan, went to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu incognito. First they met Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas. Imagine, that was pretty nice. Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas told Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that two personalities, Rupa and Sanatan, had come to see him. In great humility, this is their first meeting. Both brothers took bunches of straw between their teeth, government officers, each binding a cloth around his neck, fell down like rods before the Lord. Upon seeing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the two brothers were overwhelmed with joy. They had corresponded with him, they had heard about him, they had written him letters. Please rescue us from this pit of difficult circumstance. So Lord Chaitanya came. Out of humility, they began to cry. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked them to get up and assured them of all good fortune. The two brothers got up, and again, taking straw between their teeth, they humbly offered their prayers with folded hands. Must have taken the straws out so they could say their prayers. All glories to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the most merciful savior of the fallen souls. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sir, we belong to the lowest class of men. They're reciting their disqualifications. And our associates and employment are also of the lowest type, therefore we cannot introduce ourselves to you. We feel very much ashamed standing here before you. Dear Lord, let us inform you that no one is more sinful than us, nor is there any offender like us. Even if we wanted to mention our sinful activities, we would immediately become ashamed, and what to speak of giving them up. The verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, written by Rupa Goswami about himself. Both brothers submitted, Dear Lord, You have incarnated to deliver the fallen souls. You should consider that in this world there's none so fallen as us. We're your best candidates, your clients, your customers. You have delivered the two brothers Jagai and Madhai, but to deliver them you did not have to exert yourself very much. The brothers Jagai and Madhai belonged to the Brahmana caste, and their residence was in the holy place of Navadvip. They never served low-class persons, nor were they instruments to abominable activities. Jagai and Madhai had but one fault. They were addicted to sinful activity. However, volumes of sinful activities can be burned to ashes simply by a dim reflection of the chanting of your holy name. Jagai and Madhai uttered your holy name by way of blaspheming you. Fortunately, that holy name became the cause of their deliverance. We too are millions and millions of times inferior to Jagai and Madhai. We are more degraded, fallen, and sinful than they. Actually, we belong to the caste of meat-eaters because we are servants of meat-eaters. Indeed, our activities are exactly like those of meat-eaters because we always associate with such people. We are inimical toward cows and brahmanas. Now, they surrounded themselves with brahmanas and heard from them regularly. They're just berating themselves in this way. The two brothers, Rupa and Sanatan, very humbly submitted that due to their abominable activities, they were now bound by the neck and hands and had been thrown into a ditch filled with abominable stool-like objects of material sense enjoyment. Their expressions of humility are very humbling. No one within the three worlds is sufficiently powerful to deliver us. You are the only Savior of the fallen souls, therefore there's no one but you. If you simply deliver us by your transcendental strength, then certainly your name will be known as the Savior of the fallen souls. Let us speak one word that is very true. Plainly hear us, O merciful one. There is no other object of mercy within the three worlds but us. We are the most fallen, therefore, by showing your mercy is most successful. Let the power of your mercy be exhibited throughout the entire universe. Let us submit one piece of information before you. This is a verse by Jamunacharya from the Sri Sampradaya. Let us submit one piece of information before you, dear Lord. It is not at all false, but it is full of meaning. It is this: if you are not merciful upon us, then it will be very, very difficult to find more suitable candidates for your mercy. We're very depressed at being unfit candidates for your mercy. Yet since we have heard of your transcendental qualities, we are very much attracted to you. Indeed, we are like a dwarf who wants to capture the moon. Although we are completely unfit, a desire to receive your mercy is awakening within our minds. By serving you constantly, one is freed from all material desires and is completely pacified. When shall I engage as a permanent, eternal servant and always feel joyful, having such a fitting master? That's the end of their expression. That's what they said when they first met Lord Chaitanya. I mean, imagine first time you meet a great personality, that's what you say. And that humility didn't end. We're going to hear some more tomorrow morning about Rupa Goswami's qualification rested upon, in part, that humility, eagerness along with humility. And this is a murti of Haridas Thakur, another extremely humble personality who constantly chanted the holy name in this mood of humility. And he, there's so many examples of his quality of humility. It was profound. Everything about him was filled with humility, yet at the same time exemplary character, exemplary speech, exemplary behavior, but totally unpretentious in his quality of humility. And thus, it's the arising place of calling for mercy. And he called for mercy. We'll hear some others tomorrow morning. Call of HH Romapada and others. Now there's the possibility that one can present oneself as if one is submitting to Krishna's representative or a qualified person when the heart is crooked. And so we're going to narrate this little section from Mahabharata, and they will end the class. Some of you know from Mahabharata this personality named Ekalavya. There's a painting of Ekalavya, nice painting. He was the son of a king, but the king was the Nishada king, and the Shadas mean like aborigines that live in the forest or jungle. So his father was the king of the jungle dwellers, and he was his son, Ekalavya. And Ekalavya was an ambitious young lad. He had this not ordinary, extraordinary, ardent desire to become the best archer in the world. He wanted a gold medal in archery. So he heard about Dronacharya, that Dronacharya had the skills that were given by the Supreme Lord Parashuram. Parashuram had gifted to him all of his knowledge and wisdom, so Ekalavya went to him and asked if he would accept him as a disciple and teach him in archery skill. And Drona said, no, I won't accept you as a student. So Ekalavya went back to the forest, and so what he did was he fashioned a murti, a figure of Drona from mud, because he wasn't wealthy, he just used whatever was available in the forest, made a murti of the likeness of Drona and worshipped as a spiritual master, Drona's murti. And he became very, very expert in archery. That was his sankalpa, that was his desire. So meanwhile, back in Hastinapur, Drona had pronounced in front of everybody that Arjuna, you are the best. And not only you're the best, there's nothing that you don't know. I've given you everything that Parashuram gave to me. You have it and you're the best. You're most qualified. So one day the brothers, the 5 brothers, were going into the forest to practice their archery skills, and they saw this very amazing scene. There was a dog that had arrows fired in different directions into his mouth so he couldn't even bark. Imagine that, a dog that can't bark. And when Arjuna, pictured here, saw that, he was astonished. I don't know how to do that. And Drona said, he's taught me everything. I'm the best of all archers. So they went back to Drona and said, ¿Qué pasó? What's going on here? So Drona said, I don't know what's going on. Well, let's find out where this came from. So Drona went with them, and they came to the hermitage of Ekalavya, and lo and behold, there's this murti in the likeness of Drona. Drona said, look, I haven't accepted you as a disciple. He said, yes, well, I remember you said, no, you won't accept me as a disciple, but I've been worshiping you anyway. And now I have all these skills. And so they're the gift of you. So Drona contemplated, said, all right, if you consider yourself to be my disciple and the skill that you have came from me, then I have the right to ask for dakshin, charity from the student to the teacher. He said, yes, anything you like. He said, okay, give me your right thumb. So without hesitating, Ekalavya took this knife and cut off his right thumb, and there's the blood coming from his hand, and the piece of his thumb fell to the ground. And Drona left. And the understanding, those that are not Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord, this is from Bhakti Siddhanta. They say, oh, Ekalavya was so surrendered. Just see, he worshipped and he got all this power, and when his spiritual master asked him for the thumb, he so surrendered, he gave his thumb. Because without the thumb, he can't do the archery anymore. You need your thumb to do the archery. So Bhakti Siddhanta said the proper understanding of this situation was that Drona was right in the beginning to not accept him. He didn't accept him because he didn't have culture. If you put something very powerful in the hands of a person that doesn't have culture, they don't know how to use that thing, they can easily misuse that thing. So teaching, the first instruction of being a teacher is development of character. The first principle of education is development of character. Because without character, then whatever it is you may give as knowledge can easily be misused. Drona assessed that Ekalavya wasn't a person of character. It wasn't exactly by birth, it was just he wasn't a person of character. And so he didn't accept him. And sure enough, he went against the instruction of a spiritual master, I won't accept you, and he went ahead anyways, as if he had been accepted and worshipped and got powers. So Drona did the right thing of taking away the power, or the tool that he would need to use that power. So the external act of submission, the punchline here, or the message, reason for speaking this, is in this, under the topic of surrender that is preceded by humility. It's not preceded by ambition. It's preceded by humility. Humility is a good thing. In a Vaishnava, it's a good thing. It's a place from which spiritual strength and spiritual well-being and spiritual asset can be, is the foundation for that. It can be rested upon it. And without humility, knowledge or other kinds of apparent submission is certainly inadequate for achieving the real purpose. The real purpose is, again, clearing these obstacles that we're carrying since time immemorial of being unable to connect with Krishna. So back to the very first message. We'll go back to that verse. The process of hearing such that the antar karana, the subtle being that accompanies the soul birth after birth, where so many impressions are stored of where we think of ourselves as independent, although we're not, being very willing to hear instructions how to overcome that. One of the necessities of sadhana. Here's an apparent contradiction. Within each and every one of Krishna's names, all of Krishna's potencies are there. It's sufficient just to chant Krishna's name once. Then over here we must chant the holy name regularly. All the potencies are there, but we have to chant regularly. They have to chant regularly because this contamination is so strong, and our willingness is not so great. to overcome our own shortcomings. So there must be this willingness in the process of hearing and chanting to be sufficiently humble and introspective to see, how does this apply to me? How can I go beyond my own limitations, shortcomings, and coverings and contaminations? That kind of submission, that kind of surrender and discrimination power, the use of the intellect to discriminate, and then be given the tools and the means, the spiritual empowerment to go beyond our limitation and come closer to Krishna, come closer to our sense of being connected with Krishna again. It's a wonderful process. Just have to apply it properly and carefully. Okay, so any discussion on this topic? I see a bunch of hands going up. Let's start with Nisha over here.
Guru Maharaj, I once heard you read this quote from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where he says, "The Mahajans instructed us not to display humility before everyone, to show humility towards envious atheists like Ravana, and the pretentious Brahmana is not Vaishnav Seva or Trinadapi Sahishnuna. If we transgress this instruction, we will never become qualified to chant the holy name or attain Namaruchi. Rather, our actions will result in becoming envious of them. Hanuman's burning of Lanka is real Trinadapi Sahishnuna." So I was wondering, can you explain this idea?
Can I see the thing?
Yeah.
Okay. We should not become subordinate, nichita, to non-devotees, but to devotees. And in big letters. The Mahajans instructed us not to display humility before everyone. To show humility towards envious atheists like Ravan and pretentious Brahmanas is not Vaishnava Seva. We transgress, or Trinadapi Sunichena, we transgress this instruction, we will never become qualified to chant the holy name. Well, a couple of things. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had a certain mood. He was known as Nrsinga Guru. He was very confrontational, challenging to nonsense. He was not just like tolerate nonsense, he would confront it. That was his mood. And his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, had a very different mood. His mood was the mood of humble persuasion. He would associate with those persons, not flattering them, but by his spiritual power and intellect, gradually bring them to a position of betterment. So they had a different approach. So he had in part, it describes his approach. You're asking for an explanation. That's a partial explanation. Stand for what's right. Speak it. Be strong. Then another is, the show of humility is different than the transcendental sense of what humility is. The transcendental sense of humility is appropriate in all circumstances, which is, God is very great, I am very tiny, therefore I should serve Him. That's a transcendental sense of humility. It's appropriate in all circumstances. So now, how do you best conduct yourself when you're with, as he's saying here, those that are averse to God? We don't show that mundane kind of humility before those that are averse to God. Like Haridas is a very wonderful example. Haridas, standing before Chandkazi, he didn't cower and tremble. Not Chandkazi, the Kazi in Pulia. He wasn't timid. He didn't show that kind of humility, just tremble, oh, you're a powerful person. He said something that, would agitate his mind, but not for the purpose of agitating his mind, just for the purpose of being true. True to his own conviction, true to his own self, at risk. And sure enough, he was tormented as a result. But he didn't show this other kind of, I'm afraid of you, kind of humility. Or like Prahlad, in face of Hiranyakashipu and others. Not confrontational, but not a false sense or an external sense of humility before such people. So the internal sense of humility is always appropriate, and the external behavior, we have to be discriminating. When is that appropriate and not appropriate? How you behave towards. What Haridas Thakur said to the Kazi is, you're the representative of the king. And the king is the representative of God. So you can do with me what you like. It's your right. It's your duty. So whatever you decide, I'll accept. You didn't say, you're a nonsense. Okay? Someone else had their hand up over here.
Guru Maharaj, I had a question about the first point that you made. It says, never depart from truth. Now in dealing with devotees, sometimes, there are situations where speaking truth as it is might agitate the devotee's mind, or, it may disturb him or her. So how do we display humility and also stick to the fact that we should never depart from truth?
Well, there's discrimination and there's duplicity. Duplicity is you hide the truth or you speak falsity. And then discrimination is you may choose to speak. It's like it's difficult to speak the truth pleasingly. You can speak the truth pleasingly without departing from the truth. And there may be some circumstances, I can think of some circumstances, where, I'll give a personal example. My parents. I didn't say everything to my parents about Krishna and Krishna consciousness. Now, that wasn't departing from the truth. I just was cautious about what I would say to them, because I knew their sensibility. Their sensibility, intuitively I understood. They didn't say it, I just could understand. They would be insulted if our son is saying, you didn't teach us properly. That's not what I would be saying to them, but that's how they would hear it. So I was very sparing about what I would say to them. And when they did ask a question, they flipped out. Because that's what they thought. I was insulting them, that I didn't accept their values, and they had trained me wrong, and all of that stuff. So I didn't. To speak the truth pleasingly, that's austerity of speech according to Bhagavad Gita. I didn't see that they were ready to hear it, even pleasingly spoken. So there may be, that's just a personal example, there may be other examples where, you speak the truth, but you may not disclose everything about the truth depending upon the circumstance. But not, being misleading for the purpose of, pointing that way when it's actually not that way. Just distracting them and, diversionary tactic kind of. Better especially, depending upon the relationship, to speak directly. But how to do that in a way that, given what you just said, the person's sensitivities may be, confronted or hurt. We don't want to do that, but we don't want to depart from the truth either. So it's delicate. It very much depends on your skill and the relationship and the other person, what their capacity is to hear. I could think of some other examples, but it's a discretionary matter. Yeah, we have Sri Radhika and then Mukunda. And Hemangi, you want to say something? Okay.
Guru Maharaj, you were sharing the section from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13,
Yeah.
verses 8 to 12.
Yeah.
So it begins with amanitvam adamvitvam.
Yes, it does.
Further on, mai chanena yogena bhakti ravyapicharini. So
Yeah.
the understanding is that that is the needle that pulls the thread
Yes.
of the rest of the
It's
qualities.
the point of the needle that pulls the rest of the needle that pulls the thread.
And you are presenting that humility is the beginning of pure bhakti.
You won't get to that, that phrase, bhaktir avya. So you won't get to that without humility. That undivided devotion to Krishna without humility. You won't even see the needle. Okay?
May I ask another question?
Yeah.
You were explaining what is the correct mood in hearing and chanting, not having the mood, when we have issues with someone, that this applies to them.
Yeah,
But
there's some
actually
do-nots and there's some do's.
Yes. Now, as we, as years pass, Krishna places us in situations where we share Krishna consciousness with others.
Yeah.
And encouraging others to see their life situations from scriptural point of view.
Yeah.
So what is it that discriminates, differentiates that compassionate extension of Krishna consciousness, where we are able to, point out, that, hearing or seeing the situation from scripture and yet not,
Judging?
yes.
Well, there's a negative and there's a positive. The negative is, there's a biblical saying that says, judge not lest ye be judged. You've heard that one. So, you judge others, you're going to be judged. And we don't want to be judged. So treat others as you would have others treat you, the golden rule. Don't judge people. So instead, what you take that away, what's left, you're in the mood of service. What's the mood of service? Let me be an instrument of Krishna, devoid of false ego, just an instrument of Krishna, transparent instrument of Krishna, to try to be of assistance. So from that place of within your heart, you extend. Until we're purified, there's a bit of doership going on, where I'm going to fix the problem. I'm, this doctor that's got his medicine bag, and I've got just the medicine for you, and I'll fix your, illness, and I'll feel good that I know how to fix your illness. That's, that doership is false ego. It's the tendency. So let go of that tendency, or recognize there is such a tendency, set it to the side, and try to access just the humble mood of service. And continue to practice accessing the humble mood of service. It helps to access the humble mood of service. Practice like that. Mukunda, then.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I just wanted to clarify the meaning of this word antakarana.
Okay.
I don't think I got a clear definition. My understanding was it basically means like the subtle body.
Yes. Specifically, the mind and the power of discrimination, intellect. So mind has a function, intelligence has a function. There's also our dear friend false ego, and that's the subtle body. So the antar, karana means causation. But that which causes us to do what we do or feel what we feel or, have a sense of self is that subtle covering of the soul. That's the antarkarana. Okay?
So then just a summary point that I got from the whole thing was that, specifically that point from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary,
Yeah.
the point was I think it was saying, one should purify the mind by understanding the good and bad aspects of the antakarana.
Yes. And one should do that through the process of hearing and serving persons who are very qualified. So the eagerness, let me become freed from the bad qualities, analyzing the good and the bad per the instructions that I'm receiving. There may be, general instructions. Maybe Krishna speaking to Arjuna. It's not like our spiritual master is speaking to us. It's Krishna speaking, but it's meant for us. That kind of hearing. Okay? Hey, Mungi.
Hare Krishna. Kind of a clarification. Seems like of the 6 angas, dainya, humility, is kind of the foundation, seems like the foundations for going deeper into the other angas like Atmanivedana and...
That's exactly how Bhaktivinoda Thakur sets it up.
Okay.
In his songs.
So it's proper to understand that when you go to the stage of Atmanivedana, it's a much deeper maturity of
exactly.
humility.
Exactly.
Okay. And
now, to qualify, that's the approach that Bhaktivinoda Thakur takes. However, in the list, it's number 6. So it's not like lists means that's the chronological sequence or ontological sequence. And another point is, Jiva Goswami says, the acceptance of Goptritve Varanam Tava, that there's a master, and that master is Krishna. We're going to hear something, soon about why Krishna. But that comes from hearing, but I could hear not so well. But so some humility is necessary even to, be sitting here instead of something else on Christmas Eve, doing whatever other people are doing. There's some humility. It's not like, humility is 0 until you accept Gotra, but until that position of acceptance of there's a master, the supreme qualified master who I should serve, just like Rupa and Sanatan are saying. You're the qualified person we're submitting to. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. So, seems like even before humility matures, the quality of gratitude needs to be there. It's like kind of pre-qualifier, like without gratitude one really cannot develop true humility. Is that so?
Well, one could analyze that way. One could say, flip it around the other way and say, without humility, how is there going to be gratitude? Like, a child receives and receives and receives and receives and receives and receives and receives. Now, which is going to come first, their humility or gratitude? So that's not, they don't just become a receiving machine, they become grateful. Humility is this where there's the false ego is diminished, in the sense of the reality of self is a spiritual perspective. Anyway, one could make an argument in both directions. One question over here, I think we'll end. 2 questions, okay. In the back? Okay.
Maharaj, while you were narrating the Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami's humble attitude, the great narration which you have given, they consider themselves to be the lower than the lower people, like even Madhai, Jagai and Madhai and everybody. How genuinely, because they were not doing any abominable activities, they were not offending anybody, how that genuine feeling will come? I'm not able to understand.
Because they were engaged in the service of this terrible person. Because of that, a brahmana does not engage in the service of those kind of people. But they were engaged in the service of those kind of people. Therefore, their good qualities were nullified. The Brahminical community in which they felt themselves like that. The Brahminical community of which they were born had rejected them because they had taken that position of being a servant of Nawab Hussain Shah, who was like, a wicked guy. So they had become contaminated by that association of being in his service. They were feeling that way. They were assisting him in his nefarious activities.
Yes, Maharaj, thank you.
Yeah. In the back?
Maharaj, my question is that should we actually desire humility, or
should you actually
desire humility, or is it a byproduct of our regular spiritual practices?
We should actually desire humility. And it is a byproduct of your practices. But if we're not contemplating humility, and as I'm sure you have experienced, we've all experienced, what we think humility is changes as we mature a little bit spiritually and become a little bit purified. Even the definition of what it is to be humble, what it looks like, what it feels like, what it is, undergoes some transformation over time. So it is something we should aspire for. And it doesn't come just by aspiring for it, it comes through purification. Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.